Hi friends, welcome back to my studio. Today we're talking fountain pens, specifically how my different fountain pens work together as a team. So we're not going to go too far into the sports metaphors here because I am ill-equipped to do so, but essentially I have different positions, different uh, areas of specialty for these different pens. I'm going to talk to you today about what they are and kind of how they all work together. So I have 8 pens inked up at the moment. This is fairly normal for me. I have a couple. This is almost all of my current pens. I have one or two like freebie ones that I don't really like or use off in storage, but these are kind of all of my current pens. However, as I accumulate more pens, which is in the process of happening, what I intend to do is not just add them to my currently inked rotation, but to have them slot into a position, and if it's doing the same kind of thing as this one, swap this one out, swap that one in, put this one in storage, and then swap in and out. And so have essentially different positions that I swap in and out of. That is my plan. We will see how that actually plays out and if I stick to that. But I sewed this little pen cushion thing myself. It's got little slots for them to stick into so they don't roll around. And I very intentionally didn't make it way bigger. So this one is a prime contender to be swapped out. I purposefully gave myself a small amount of growing room if I need it, but not too much. Too many pens inked is kind of too much to keep on top of. I know that Drew Brown from Goulet Pens very vehemently talks about only having 3 pens inked at a time. I'm not that far, but I kind of want to stay here. This seems like a happy place for me. But let's talk a little about how these all play together. So I do have a video, and I will put a link up to that, where I talk about all of my fountain pen collection, what I like about them, what I don't like about them, why I bought them in the first place. However, I have accumulated these 2 vanishing points since then, so it's not entirely up to date and won't stay up to date. So I guess I'll have to do a new one someday. How sad for me. So that was about kind of the mentality I went with when choosing them and why I bought them. This is a couple months later. This has been a pretty stable lineup for me for about 2 months, which, in the 3.5 months that I've been fountain pen using is a long time, although I'm sure it will change. So let me tell you how these have kind of found their place. These are working from finest to broadest. The first one is my Pilot Kakuno in an extra fine. This has an incredibly fine tip. I bought this one first. This was my very first fountain pen, and I bought it because I wanted it to displace my 0.3 millimeter Pentel Energel pen, which is what I had been using in my planner. I liked how incredibly thin the 0.3 is. And this is a great stand-in for that. Let's see if we can get it to focus. But it turns out that I don't actually use it the way I thought I would. I mean, I do, in the sense that I do use it to replace that 0.3 millimeter gel pen, but the primary place I use it is in my 5-year journal. So my 5-year journal, I'll post a link to where I set this up, is from Planners Anonymous. It is not a 5-year journal in design. I have made it that way. It's just plain dot grid paper. I use 2. Each one is a half a year. And I bought this before I started using fountain pens, and I'm only in my first 6 months. So I don't want to change it because I love these notebooks. I want to keep using them. I've already done 6 months in them, but it's not going to hold up to like serious fountain pen usage. However, it does hold up really well to the Pilot Extra Fine. So here's where I was using the gel pen. Oh, here you can see where I switched from using the gel pen to using the Extra Fine, and it doesn't bleed through. It doesn't cause me any trouble. So primarily these days, this is used as my 5-year journal pen. And not a whole lot else, although it is there ready for me if I need it. Next up are my 2 vanishing points. I did not intend to buy 2. Circumstances beyond my control. Circumstances very much within my control, if we're being honest, led to me getting 2. I bought them both used. If you're interested in a vanishing point, but you don't know if you're going to like it or not, I highly recommend buying them used because they are a little polarizing, and therefore there are quite a few people who buy them and don't like them and sell them at about 2/3 the cost. And that's how I got both of these. Admittedly, buying 2 at 2/3 the cost is still more expensive than buying 1 at full cost, but now I have 2, so. And I can always sell. This is my favorite one. Just, I love the beautiful blue. With the green shimmer, can you see it? Yeah, a little bit. So, it's possible this one will get sold again someday, but there's no hurry, so. These are both in a fine nib, so they have exactly the same width. So let's actually kind of swatch these together or do some writing samples. So this is the Pilot Kakuno Extra Fine. I'm using Cosmo Air Snow, which is a paper I love. It's wonderful, but it does make things write a little broader than something like a Tomoe River paper. So just so you know that, and honestly, it writes a little broader on this than it does even in my 5-year journal. So paper, ink, pen, they all work together. But I'm going to be talking about it on this paper because most of what we're going to be talking about is in my planner, and this is the paper I use. So this is the Pilot Extra Fine. Here is the Pilot Vanishing Point in fine. And as I said, both of these are fine. And you can see that they are definitely broader. I think we're having focus problems. We'll try leaving it down and see if that helps. New camera. It's always an adventure. These are thicker than my Energel 0.3 that I used to use in my planner, but they show off ink really nicely. And for me, for basic writing in my planner, this is my happy place. It's thick enough to see the color and the shading. It's thin enough to still be able to write a significant amount in a 1.5-inch box. So let me pull some examples for you. So this is my current planner page. Here is my vanishing point. And, you know, I can't get multiple words. I mean, if I wrote smaller, I could, but I get the great shading. I can get some significant letters across a line together, and it's just been my happy size for 1.5-inch planner boxes. That is why I have kept 2, is because these are my go-tos, and it's nice to have them in 2 different colors. Is that indulgent? Yeah, a little, but you know, this is my lineup and I get to do it how I want. So here we are. So that is why I have 2 of those. Those are my staple. And the reason I bought the Vanishing Point is when I started using fountain pens for more of my daily writing, I found that I really preferred the snap caps to my ones that that twist, because I wanted to be fast at just jotting something down for my day-to-day planning. Could I have used a snap cap? Yes. Did I want to try clicking? Yes, I did, because that is what I was used to from gel pens, and I do really love it. As I said, I bought this one used, and it came with a yellow nib, even though the trim is silver, and that doesn't bother me, but in case you notice it, that's what it is. I could get a replacement or trade with someone or something, but it's not a big deal. So those are my go-tos. This Platinum Prefounte, I believe is how it's pronounced, is also in a fine. I bought this one. This predates my Vanishing points. So this used to kind of sit in the same spot as these Vanishing points as just a fine nib to write my day-to-day things. However, it is a bit of a broader nib. So this is the, I've lost track of what I said, Platinum. In my last video, I kind of bashed this one. I didn't love it at the time. I have since fallen in love with it. It loves these Pilot Urushizuku inks, and so that helps. I was putting something I think that was a little too dry in it at the time, and I have adjusted to the grip. At the time, I hadn't, and I was a little not used to a circular grip compared to like a triangle grip, but in the weeks since, that has changed. I find the Platinum to write a little wider, and so when I start maybe swapping pens in and out more, when I have a bigger collection, I think this one could slot into this same kind of working position. But since this is kind of the sum total of my pens right now, I am using this kind of in the same way as I'm using the Vanishing points for kind of just the day-to-day writing. So here it is. In my planner, you can see it's a little thicker than the Vanishing point, but I'm still using it. I just do that based on what color is inked at the time. So I actually already have this one's like replacement on the way. It's something with a more specialty nib, and then I think this one will go in reserve to swap in and out for the Vanishing points. But I do really like it. It's got a really nice writing experience. I think it's got a little more feedback compared to the very smooth, well, no, I think it's the paper. It's just really pleasant to write with. It's really pleasant particularly to write with on this paper, and in particular with the Pilot Urushizuku inks. Big fan of that, but not that different, and if you're looking for a pen, a whole lot cheaper. Also, you could get the Platinum Preppy, which is cheaper yet, but I don't like the branding on it, so I spent the extra money to get the Prefounte instead of the Preppy. But if you want a fountain pen for like $5, the Preppy would give you the same writing experience as this one. Okay, those are my daily writers. The bulk of the writing happens with these four we've talked about. Next is my Diplomat Magnum. This is in a Western medium nib, and it's running out of ink. It's the end of July. I'm about to switch over to my August inks, so we'll see how we do here. But this is my, oh, we're doing okay. Diplomat Magnum. This is a medium. I forgot to write that this one is fine. And this one is significantly wider, not super thick, you can see in my planner, I am still writing with it when I need to, but I use it more for headings and special additions that I do for just the writing. I'm trying to find one. Yeah, here. So in this planner page, here's my vanishing point here, and this is a light ink that doesn't catch on camera quite as well as here's my Diplomat Magnum, and I use it for like special occasion extra headers. So I think of these four we first talked about as writing, and these next four as specialty header kinds of ones. And so that is how I'm using it. It shows shading off amazingly in this week's spread. I'm using it here to celebrate my new phone, which is what we are recording on right now. Let me find some more examples if I have any. Okay, in this one, I used it to write the days, right? And I think that's really awesome, and it looks amazing in this ink. So good. This is the Sailor Ink Studio 460. It's really gorgeous. It just works amazingly with shading inks, and shading inks are my favorite inks. So that is the Diplomat Magnum. Lots of people also like it because it's a bit of a soft nib, and in general, actually all of my nibs are pretty soft, meaning they've got a little bounce, a little give to them. Maybe not the Kakuno, but in general, I like that feeling, and this one is really good. Continuing with kind of my specialty header pens, this is my vintage Wahl lever filler pen. It's flexy, it's semi-flex, and which actually I find is a good size for me. Some people kind of find that semi-flex is like not as flexible as they want, but I think those are people who are writing big. And for planner calligraphy, I think this is a great size. Again, I believe it might be running out of ink. It's the end of the month, but looks like we're doing okay. So we do get some nice line variation, but I find it a nice controlled ink flow, so it's not as likely to create bleeding, and it's just a great way to use some of the skills I have built up with my lettering practice for the last year and a half. So again, I use these as special headers in my planner. So that's this week. Here it is in that week. So, you know, in the course of my planning, there end up like small, awkward spaces that I like just fill with kind of a couple word memory. So this is the book I was reading, and it like just fills that little space up nicely. Now, as we get bigger yet, this is my Fountain Pen Revolution pen, and if you watched my previous collection video, you know I have a bunch of opinions on this. It's gotten better since I filmed that. I was complaining that it leaked a lot, and the answer to that ended up being that I needed to put silicone grease on the threads of the converter. It came with them, but in the midst of my playing with it, I'd washed it out enough that it needed more. That has significantly cut down on my leaks, although it's still the pen most likely to get ink on my hands. This is the Fountain Pen Revolution Himalaya V2, and it's got the Ultra Flex nib on it. This pen is very ink dependent, I have found. So we did great here in terms of no railroading, but I have found that it needs a wetter ink, no sheening, no sheening, no shimmer, anything that might break up the surface tension is a problem. But this is the Diamine. This is Autumn Oak, and it works really well for that, and I can get bigger if I want to, as long as I'm being careful and I'm going slow and I have the right ink in it. Now this thing gushes ink. I don't know if you're going to be able to see on camera how, how much ink is on here. So it's like pooled. I don't know that you can see it, but it's got like a domed glistening effect here at the moment. So this will take a while to dry. Depending on the paper you're using, it might feather even on fountain pen friendly paper. So you need to be careful with that if you are really pushing it. If you're using it just to write with a little bit of expressiveness, which I don't have any practice doing, it's still kind of glistening on the page here, but you're not going to be as likely to get the bleeding and the feathering, but it deposits a lot of ink. I got it with the ebonite feed. There's a part of me that's tempted to try and decrease the flow on this. It's a little too wet for a lot of my applications, but I also don't want it to railroad. So, you know, it's a whole thing. I don't use this one in my planner a ton. It's a little big and potentially messy. I tend to use this for calligraphy elsewhere, but occasionally I do use it in my planner. I just try to be controlled about it. But mostly I use this as practice for my lettering. I like to use it in particular. Find an example. I have this notebook that I just practice my lettering in with song lyrics. So here you can see I did do this one with a shimmering ink and we got through it, but it was a little rough. So I don't use that one in my planner a whole lot, but I still really like having it in my lineup. The last one that I've got inked up, I actually have never used in my weekly planner. I use it occasionally in my daily. I wanted to try stub nibs, and I remembered that I had this Pilot Parallel in my collection from back in a previous calligraphy days. So this is the Pilot Parallel, but a lot of stub nibs are 1.1 millimeters wide, and this one is 1.5, and it is like way too big for me to really use. And so it is inked up because I can't even spell here because I'm talking. Parallel. My apologies. It's too much for me for my planner, and I haven't really found a use for it because I just can't write. I could maybe do a short header in my planner, but I have not yet found a use for this. But what is really nice about it is that it can use some really cool inks. So this is the Organic Studios Nitrogen, which has like that gorgeous red sheen, and like none of my normal pens put enough ink down to really see that. It hasn't dried enough for me to show it to you yet. So I don't have a great way of doing I think maybe my Diplomat Magnum is the only one I would really feel comfortable putting some weird inks in terms of shimmering and sheening and whatever, and the Parallel just is like so much more than that. But I haven't really, it is in prime contention for being moved off the team for the moment. I'm just finishing the ink that's in there first. But you can see the red sheen is starting. Let's see if I get, there it is on camera. So I mean, it's really cool, but it's not that functional for me. I do have a much smaller stub nib coming, and I'm hoping that that will kind of be the right combination of things for me, but it will be a while before it's here. I will do a video on that when I can. This has still not dried all the way. There's a little bit of warping of the paper, and it's not bleeding through, but there's significant shadowing. I don't know if you can see it on camera. There you go. From both the Himalaya and the Pilot. The other ones are pretty much fine. So anyway, this is my lineup. These are my teammates. I really love them. I do keep them in a specific order on my little cushion here so that it's easy to pick the one I'm looking for at all times, because besides the Kakuno, none of them are clear, so I gotta remember what ink is in all of them, and having them in a specific order and like kind of in the way that I will use them really helps. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about my fountain pens or how I use them, feel free to leave them below. If you are a fountain pen user, I'm curious to hear, do you like to have a whole variety of nibs inked up at the same time? Do you have a certain way you use them? I'm curious. Do you have a lineup, or are you just using pens kind of individually? I would be fascinated to hear. All right, I will talk to you again soon. Bye, friends.